here's the setup for the BANZAI example that's portrayed in the rule book, page 30 of SK4. Let's go over some limitations and some qualifiers before we progress through the example so you can understand the example a little bit better. 1. Any onboard Japanese leader, which in this case is going to be our 9-0, right here on the backside, may declare a BANZAI charge. Infantry units in multiple hexes may be part of the same BANZAI charge. So here we have lots of squads in multiple hexes, so any of those squads may participate in the BANZAI charge with some exceptions. All participants in the BANZAI charge must be in good order. They're all in good order. The only non-good order Japanese you're going to have is probably a unit in melee or a broken half squad. Free to move and have not yet started their movement phase. While we have one unit that is not free to move, and that is our unit in CC6 Squad G. He is pinned and may not participate within the BANZAI charge. Jumping into the BANZAI does not exempt you from pin status, therefore he cannot be included. BANZAI, as a result of BANZAIing and declaring BANZAI and being part of the BANZAI, those units have a morale level increase by 1 for the rest of the player turn. The rest of the turn throughout the close combat phase, not that it matters in the close combat phase. Lose any concealment, which we haven't gone over yet, but these do not have any concealment, so once they declared BANZAI, they would immediately lose concealment during their movement phase, and are exempt from pin results, which is actually really useful. And are exempt from pin results unless entering bamboo or via a collapsing hut. So those are specific terrain rules that will not be covered in this specific example. While part of the BANZAI charge, BANZAI units have 8 MF. The wounded leader only has 3. So if the leader gets wounded along the way of BANZAIing, then if he's expended 3 movement factors or more, he's done for that BANZAI. He has to stop moving. And the movement factors may not be increased. So if you should happen to be running along a road or stacked with a leader or whatever, 8 MF is all you get. Or 3 if you're wounded. They may not assault move or carry more than their inherent portage capacity, their IPC, but they may enter an enemy unit's location, which is the entire purpose of the BANZAI charge. BANZAI units must immediately move towards the target using impulse movement, and we'll describe that. Impulse movements, each BANZAI unit must move 1 hex. So all of these units you see here, A through F, A, B, C, D, E, and F, and the leader will participate in the BANZAI movement. Their target is going to be Y5. So therefore, you move in an impulse movement, and all units must move prior to any defensive first fire that can occur against any of those specific units. So they all move simultaneously, and they all expend the most costly movement factor that any other unit in that BANZAI has expended. So in this case, you're going to be seeing the unit A in the middle in AA6 move to Z5. That's actually 1 movement factor expenditure. But the leader in the back will be moving into the jungle hex in BB4. So that will be a 2 movement factor expenditure. So everyone in the entire BANZAI is going to be considered having expended 2 movement factors, regardless of what terrain they're in. It's the costliest terrain. So keeping that in mind, let's continue with the rules. So the BANZAI charge continues with a new impulse until all units still in the BANZAI charge can no longer move in a BANZAI charge. And let's look at the qualifiers for that. A BANZAI unit must enter the target hex. In this case, the target hex will be Y5. Unless another BANZAI unit already occupies that specific hex. Otherwise, each BANZAI unit must move closer in hexes to the target hex or enter an enemy occupied hex that is not further away in hexes from the target hex, or move adjacent to the target hex. So that's a lot of hex, 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 hex. What does that mean? One, we're declaring Y5 as our target hex. We have to move closer to it. Pretty clear and pretty simple. If you don't want to move closer to it, you could enter an enemy occupied hex, which is not further away from the target hex. In this specific example, you'll see BB6 and the AA7. It's 3 hexes away from Y5. 1, 2, 3. 3. So it could enter AA7 if it chose to, but we'll go over that in the specific example. It cannot enter CC7 because it's going further away from the target hex. So AA7 eligible for squad E, CC7 ineligible. That's why they have those 2 units there. And a BANZAI unit remains part of the BANZAI. You may not leave the BANZAI until the BANZAI is completed at the end of the turn. Eliminated, broken, or out of MF, or in a hex with an enemy unit at the start of an impulse. Can no longer move as per the BANZAI rules. Or you can voluntarily end your charge when you're adjacent to the target hex. So lots of qualifiers. So again, you're part of the BANZAI until you're dead, broken, which in this case the Japanese have to break multiple times to be actually broken, out of MF, which is, let's say, running up a hill into a building or a jungle is going to expend a lot of MF real quickly, or in a hex with an enemy unit at the start of an impulse. So after he enters, you'll see units entering Y5. Those units entering Y5 may no longer move during that BANZAI turn, a BANZAI phase. Essentially, they're done. Or if you're adjacent to a target hex, you can decide not to move anymore, and we'll go over that. So whenever a multi-man counter BANZAI unit enters the hex of a good order enemy infantry unit, all of those such defending units must use defensive first fire against the unit entering as one combined fire group using triple point blank fire, even if it means final protective fire. BANZAI units may use triple point blank fire in the advanced fire phase against in-hex enemy units, and friendly fire does not affect those in hex because they're not in melee. Remember, if you're not in melee, any fire into the hex with other friendly units do not affect them. A unit cannot fire outside its own hex that an enemy unit also occupies. There's a BANZAI ambush rule. We're not going to, we'll go ahead and cover it. It's just real small. Ambush may be possible normally if other friendly units advance into a hex containing BANZAI units. So you'll see these units entering Y5. If you should happen to have another unit that could advance into the hex in Y5, it's actually very deleterious. The BANZAI units are considered inexperienced for the purposes of determining ambush. If you are already in the hex, as you'll see in Y5, there's no ambush because you do not advance into a hex with an enemy. You moved into a hex with an enemy, so there will be no ambush if you BANZAI'd into a hex. So if you have units that BANZAI'd ran into a hex, don't take anybody else in there, because then you'll have to roll for ambush, and then you'll have to add the inexperienced modifier for the BANZAI units. Not a good thing. Here's our marker for the BANZAI. Now let's go over the specific example in the book. In the movement phase, the Japanese 890 leader in the back here declares a BANZAI charge against the 7, 6, 8, and 0 Y5. Along with the 6 unpinned, this one's pinned, Japanese squads. You could place the BANZAI counter on each, which is kind of like a pain in the ass. I kind of put it off to the side like this and say all these guys are moving. You know, it's not that difficult to understand that all these guys are moving. As long as you talk to your opponent, it's not that big a deal. But if you want to clutter it up and put a whole bunch of BANZAI counters, you could. And the 90 leader does not have to have LOS. As a matter of fact, he does not have LOS in this situation. His constituents of the BANZAI do have LOS. Any one of these units that are included in the BANZAI charge only one of them need have LOS to that particular unit. So if they wanted to, the 447 here, because this is a hut and huts are only considered hindrances in PTO, this one could qualify for doing the BANZAI charge, and only that squad B and the leader, if they wanted to, you could just BANZAI those two units directly at Y5, because squad B has an LOS to Y5, as do all the other squads in this example. Hindrances for the palm trees. Huts are hindrances, +1 hindrances, so those are not LOS obstacles. So let's go to the first impulse. We declare BANZAI, designate our units in the BANZAI. In the first impulse, squad A must move to Z5. He must move here. He may not move here to AA7 because that would be moving further away in hexes from the target hex. So therefore, he must move to Z5. He must move closer in hexes. Squad B in BB3 must move to AA4. Squad E can either move to AA6, which is here, or enter enemy occupied hex in AA7, as that hex is not further away from the target hex, like we said before. It's 3 hexes away, 3 hexes away. In this example, he proceeds to AA6. Squad C, which is here, may move to AA4 or AA5, because both of those hexes qualify for getting closer to the destination or target hex. And Squad D also can go to AA5 or AA6, just as BB4 can go to either one of these locations. Squad D to go here, here. This one can go here and here. So both choose to go to AA5. So we got D going and C going. So C and D are going to AA5. Okay. Again, our impulse is not completed yet. We've gone 1. This is 1 movement factor. This is 1. This is 2. This is 2. And these two right here, squad F and the leader will move here. And that's also 2 movement factors. Impulse 1 is now over. Defensive fire may occur. And the movement factors expended are 2, because that is the costliest terrain that we've entered. At the end of this impulse, the American units could then use defensive first fire on any of the Japanese units. In this example, none of them choose a defensive first fire. The 558, if I were the 558, I would probably light this unit up. But that was me. In the second impulse, Squad A, which is the lead squad, must enter Y5. Squad B, so we're going to move Squad A into our hex here. Squad B, which is the one up top, must enter Z4. It must get closer to our target hex. Okay. Squad E must enter Z5. Again, he can't go back here. He must get closer to the target hex. And it's the same singular impulse. Just because he's entered there does not exempt these units in that specific impulse in going whatever direction they want. He has to go towards that location. Squads C and D, which are here, must enter Z4 or Z5, because they must get closer to the target hex. C chooses Z4 and D chooses Z5. Okay. Continuing on, the 9-0 leader and Squad F choose AA4 over AA5. They could go either location because both of those are going closer to that target location. This ends impulse 2. The cost of this impulse is 2. So you've got this terrain, which is 2, because it's a hut. And then you also have the hut in which Squad A entered, which is also 2 movement factors. So impulse 2 has expended 2 movement factors. Our BANZAI charge has expended 4 movement factors total. And again, at the end of the second impulse, defensive first fire may commence. And in this case, it must commence, because the 768 is now faced with a triple point blank fire attack and enemy units has entered its location. So he has to fire. He must first fire on that unit using triple point blank fire. So the American rolls a 7 on the 20 chart, because 7 times 3 is 21, goes down to the 20 chart of the infantry fire table with a 0 dice roll modifier. You have a +1 hut terrain effect modifier. He's in a hut. And you have a -1 non-assault movement. So they cancel each other out. And that causes a 2 morale check. The squad A rolls as a 6 and is unaffected. Why? It's only one below before. But remember, BANZAI's morale level +1. This unit has an 8 morale level at this point in time. And since the 6 equals his morale level, you would think it would have a pin. But again, look on the counter. Pin, heat of battle, not applicable. So the unit is not pinned whatsoever. And then we also have, since he first fired, we have 8 residual firepower in that hex. At this moment, squads B, C, D, and E can voluntarily choose to end their charge, since they are adjacent to the target hex, and there are no adjacent enemy occupied hexes that are devoid of BANZAI units, but none choose to do so. Again, because both all these units here and these units here are adjacent to a hex that has been occupied by another BANZAIing unit, they can end their impulse at this point in time. Or they can either continue to go on into that hex or enter a hex that is adjacent to the target hex. So stop, continue on, or enter. That is their option. The 9-0 must continue on because he doesn't qualify for any of those. In the third impulse, no Japanese unit must enter Y5, just like we said before, because it already has an enemy unit or a friendly unit in there. But squad B, in this example, is going to enter there anyway. Squad C enters Y4. Again, you may enter a hex adjacent to the target hex. And squads D and E enter Y6, entering a target hex adjacent to the target hex. The leader and squad enter Z4. The impulse costs us 2 MF. Why? We have a 2 MF expenditure here, a 2 MF expenditure here, a 1 here, and a 1 here. So therefore, you take the highest MF expenditure. We now have total used 6 movement factors in the through the third impulse. Okay, 8 residual firepower. Remember, this unit moves into the hex, and there's 8 residual firepower on it as I completely massacre the stack. So first thing first, the 8 residual firepower occurs, and we get a free attack on that unit. That causes a 2 morale check when the American rolls a 5 in the example. Squad B rolls a 7 and is stepped reduced. 2 morale check, and Squad B rolls a 5. It's only 1 morale check higher to make it an 8 morale, so it failed its morale check when it rolled a 7, and instead of breaking, it is simply step reduced and is flipped over. Again, very resilient. The 768 must now attack Squad B. Why must he attack Squad B? Because again, he entered his location. The residual firepower attacks first. Now the squad must subsequent first fire against the 347. Not now the 447 is going to be exempt because his movement phase is over. But the 347 will be taking that attack. The attack is going to be a little different because it's going to be tripled and halved for subsequent first fire. So it's going to be 21 for tripling and halved for subsequent first fire. So it's going to be 10.5, or 11, or on the A chart. Again, the dice roll modifier is 0, +1 for the hut, -1 for non-assault movement. And when the American rolls a 3, the attack result is a K2. The 347 casualty reduces to a 237. I had one right here. So a K2 result will casualty reduce the unit. Casualty reduced units. Remember, he acts like he's a full squad, so we replace him with a half squad. That's the casual reduction. Now, the casual reduced unit needs to roll a 2 morale check, and in this example, the unit rolls a 12 and fails and is casual reduced again by rolling a 12, and he is subsequently eliminated. All BANZAI units, again, may choose to voluntarily end their charge, but none need to do so. Okay, and this is the 4th impulse. We have 2 movement factors remaining. The BANZAI units must continue to enter Y5 or move adjacent to it. The 9-0 leader and squad F enter Y5, while squad C enters X4. Again, he can move adjacent to it. Squads D and E can go to X5, again, still remaining adjacent to it. And the 9-0 and squad F enter the hex. The 768 uses final protective fire because he must attack. Well, actually, the 8 residual firepower attacks for no effect in the example. So the 8 residual firepower attacks first. Their example gives no effect. Now, since he considered he's still moving, this unit is forced to fire again with triple firepower. But since he's final fired, he has to final protective fire, and the dice roll will also double as a morale check for that specific unit. So in this case, the 768 has an 8. He has to roll an 8 or less, essentially not to be broken. So what happens is in the example, the 768 fires and rolls a 9 on the 8 firepower column. Again, 21 firepower, halved is going to be 10, and that's going to be back down on the 8 chart. He rolls a 9 on the 8 firepower column, does not affect either the leader or the squad, but because he rolled a 9, it will break the 768. So that unit is broken. I don't have a DM, so we're just going to go like that. Going to remove the first fire. Excuse me, the final fire. Now we have all those bad guys in there. Having spent all 8 MF, again, we started back here. 2, 4, 2, 4, 2, 4, 6, 8 to enter there. So the BANZAI charge is now over. The 8 residual firepower attacks, the BANZAI counter on each unit at that point is flipped over to a lax side. Now at this point, you want to definitely put your BANZAI counters, your lax, on all your units. Why is that? Because sometimes weird stuff can happen, and you want to make sure that all these guys are identified as such. Because a +1 dice roll modifier, or die roll modifier in this case for ambush, you really need to keep track of that. And one more thing is the morale level of each BANZAI unit, considering they still have these BANZAI counters on them, still remains increased by 1 for the duration of the turn. But now each is subject to possible pinning, because now it's not actually BANZAIing, but it's still getting the effects of the morale boost. During the event's fire phase, so the defensive fire phase not that it occurs, but because this unit's broken, the 9-0 leader can direct squads A and F. So this leader here can direct squads A and F. They have 8 firepower against the broken 768. And they cannot fire outside the hex because they're restricted by triple point blank fire mechanics. And so that firepower is 8 tripled, it's 24, halved because it's the advanced fire phase, so that's a 12 chart, and they will not be affected by Japanese units outside the hex attacking the 768 because a melee does not exist. So if these units were to attack in here as well, then these units will be free from harm because they're not in melee. So this unit would attack at 12 firepower. These units back here, they could attack at 4 and 4, which is 8. Doubled in half is normal. So that would be an 8+1 chart on the broken unit. Not affecting these units because the melee is not in the hex. And this unit up here would be a 4+1 on the same unit. Or they could combine. All right. So that is the example of a BANZAI charge directly from the rulebook. Go over it again, move your own units, and enjoy BANZAIs throughout your SK4 career.